Welcome to Weekly World News on Spring Nectar TV, brought to you by Vibha Ramesh, Los Angeles, United States. First, the top headlines. Rittenhouse receives standing ovation. Harvard professor guilty of leading Chinese initiative. Brexit minister resigns. Uncertainty lurks over Northern Ireland renegotiation. India strengthens ties with 5 Asian countries. First hybrid school set up in India. New jab to convince unvaccinated people in Germany to get inoculated. Malaysia battles worst flooding in years. Moving on to news in detail. A month after Kyle Rittenhouse was acquitted of all charges, he was venerated as a hero by millions of followers. News has it that on Monday, Rittenhouse was given a standing ovation at a conservative conference. Called a Merry Fest, the conference was held in Phoenix.
Always be humble and look at the positive in life and focus on today, not tomorrow. You can only live one day at a time.
The panel discussed the events that took place in Kenosha, Wisconsin, when Rittenhouse had killed 3 people at a Black Lives Matter protest in 2020. Meanwhile, Charles Lieber, a professor of Harvard University and former chair of the university's Chemistry and Chemical Biology department, was found guilty of collaborating with the Chinese on a recruitment program. According to sources, Lieber, who was arrested in January, had intentionally concealed his participation in China's Thousand Talents plan in order to protect his reputation. This program is known to have been created with the intent of recruiting people possessing the knowledge of foreign technology as well as intellectual property of China. However, Lieber denied the charges as his lawyer Mark Mukasey argued that there wasn't sufficient proof. This case has prompted several hundred faculty members from leading institutes such as Yale, Stanford, and Berkeley to attest letters to the U.S. Attorney General urging him to end the initiative. Moving on. Russia has charted out a list of debatable guarantees which it demands from the West as an incentive to minimize the crisis over Ukraine. Among the various demands listed out are a prohibition on Ukraine entering NATO and a cap on the deployment of weapons and troops. According to sources, the 8-point draft was released by Russia with a clause that any rejection of their demands would trigger a military response which can be compared to the Cuban crisis of 1962. However, the demands made are too aggressive to be readily consented to by the West. Moreover, the demands that were handed over to the US this week have all the signs of being reviewed negatively by NATO countries. And that's not all. A senior US official also mentioned that Russia is fully aware that some of their demands are unacceptable. Over to Brexit. In an unexpected turn of events, Brexit Minister Lord Frost resigned from the cabinet on Saturday night. His resignation is only expected to make Brexit negotiations tougher. News has it that Frost's resignation from the cabinet was triggered by his frustration over negotiations related to Brexit, the government's policies on COVID, and also the increases in tax. This is what he said at a conference last month. I am very happy that Free Britain, or at least Merry England, is probably now the freest country in the world as regards COVID restrictions. No mask rules, no vaccine passports, and long may it remain so. However, the letter released on Saturday night to the Prime Minister conveyed that he was disappointed that this plan has become public this evening, and in the circumstances, I think it's right for me to step down with immediate effect, he said. Meanwhile, negotiations over Northern Ireland have hit deadlock once again as the European Union announced that they are unwilling to consider a renegotiation. Sources say that despite Downing Street agreeing to remove trade barriers between Northern Ireland and Great Britain, the EU Commissioner made it amply clear that they are not even willing to renegotiate at this point. Over to India. External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar announced at the India Central Asia Dialogue that the nation is moving to the next level with 5 Asian countries. His opening remarks read, "We are very pleased at the state of our bilateral relations, but we know that the potential is very much more. Each one of us today faces the test of rebuilding our economy." He also added, Our pursuit of sustainable development goals must also be energized. But together we can do this better, and India, I assure you, will be your steadfast partner, he said. News has it that these countries might attend the Republic Day parade in January next year. Meanwhile, a one-of-a-kind hybrid school, the first one of its kind, has been set up in India. Jain International Residential School Hybrid, as it's called, is a network of school campuses across 20 cities. This Cambridge-affiliated school offers a blend of online and offline classes. In this model, a student learns subjects like math and physics online through a network of teachers operating from anywhere in the country. And for classes that require practical work like sports or lab, the student goes to one of the 40 home schools that are part of the network. In the words of Francis Joseph, governing board member of the school, through this model, we aim to bring together quality teachers from across physical boundaries so that any learner located in any part of the country, however remote the place may be, can have access to good education. Moving on, UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson announced that there would be no new COVID restrictions before Christmas. However, he also asserted that data on the threat posed by the new variant Omicron will be monitored on an hourly basis. The 2-hour cabinet meeting held on Monday had health advisors brief Johnson on the latest data, including the number of new cases caused by Omicron and rise in hospitalizations. According to reliable sources, there may not be any imposition of new restrictions before December 25th. However, talks are on and one can expect an announcement on new COVID rules after Christmas. The measures may include curfews for the hospitality segment, social distancing, and limits on indoor gatherings. And in Germany, the European Medicines Agency has approved a new vaccine to combat COVID-19. This protein-based vaccine, they believe, could persuade the scores of unvaccinated Germans to get inoculated. Called Nuvaxovid, this vaccine has been developed with traditional technology, especially when compared to the other vaccines in the market that use the mRNA technology. Nuvaxovid has been tested to show over 90% efficacy against symptomatic infection. Sources say that this 2-dose Novavax vaccine will soon be allowed for use by the government's Vaccination Advisory Board. Good news is the approval has come at a time when health experts are anticipating a spike in COVID cases during the winter, especially led by the Omicron variant. Meanwhile, the Christian Democratic Union has a new leader now who might replace Angela Merkel as Chancellor. To that effect, right-winger Friedrich Merz was elected by a majority vote, beating Helge Braun and Norbert Röttgen with 62%. That said, the party members' summit scheduled to be held in January, where CDU delegates will have to confirm the party's vote, will be the defining moment. Moving on, in the wake of Brexit's Minister Lord Frost's resignation, the French government suggested UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson to consider rebuilding trust with the European Union. In that context, France's EU Affairs Minister Clement Beaune said, "We had difficult relations, but we always continued the dialogue. I sent my best with respect to David Frost after his resignation. It is time for the British government to rebuild a climate of trust with France and the European Union in the interest of all," he said. And here's a take on the current COVID status by the World Health Organization. According to them, the Omicron variant has been detected in 89 countries, and the number of cases caused by this variant doubles in 1.5 to 3 days in those areas with community transmission. The organization stated that there are still limited data on the clinical severity of Omicron. More data are needed to understand the severity profile and how severity is impacted by vaccination and pre-existing immunity. The World Health Organization further warned that hospitalizations in the UK and South Africa continue to rise. And given rapidly increasing case counts, it is possible that many healthcare systems may be quickly overwhelmed. Meanwhile, in Malaysia, heavy downpours have triggered widespread flooding, displacing over 30,000 people. rain started last Friday, causing rivers to overflow and submerging several urban areas. Thousands of motorists were stranded and over 30,000 people across 8 states and territories had to evacuate. Commenting on the torrential rains, Prime Minister Ismail Sabri Yaqub remarked at a press conference that the amount of rain that fell in Selangor yesterday, what fell in one day would usually fall in 1 month. Besides prompt aid for the flood victims, the Premier also promised funding to the tune of 100 million ringgit for the repair of damaged houses and infrastructure. These floods are seen as the worst since 2014, which displaced over 100,000 people. Over to Sudan. 3 years after the start of large-scale demonstrations that eventually led to the defeat of Omar al-Bashir, several protesters set out once again, chanting slogans against General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan. Security forces intervened and opened tear gas to disperse the crowd. Fearing the nation's democratic transition, protesters shouted, "The people want the downfall of Burhan." Burhan led a coup in October and later detained Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok in his residence for close to a month. The mass demonstrations led to the closing of bridges that linked the twin cities of Khartoum and Omdurman. Bringing you the last in this week's report, Did You Know? Did you know of a sport called extreme ironing? As the name suggests, it's an extreme sport that brings together the adrenaline-gushing thrill of an outdoor sport with the complacency of a well-ironed outfit. This sport requires participants to iron clothes in extreme locations and situations, which includes while skiing, on a mountain climb, while parachuting, underwater, in the middle of a street, and the like. This sport was invented in 1980 by Tony Hiam, although it gained traction only in 1997 when Phil Shaw of Leicester, England, combined the two activities to save time. And in 2003, extreme ironing earned international recognition when a documentary about the sport was aired by WAC TV in Britain. With that, we come to the end of this week's news report. Before the next episode of World News, I'd like to wish you and your family happy holidays on behalf of Spring Nectar TV. Stay safe.